Hey, how's it going everyone? This is Dominick from the Comic Book Report YouTube channel, over here doing another guest review for organicpricedbooks.com. And today I've got a fascinating entry for you from DC Comics. We're going to be looking at the Detective Chimp Casebook. The issues in this collection were primarily written by John Broome and illustrated primarily by Carmine Infantino. The comics in this volume were published by DC Comics beginning in 1952. The volume itself collects materials from The Adventures of Rex the Wonder Dog, issue 4, and then issues 6 through 46, along with DC Comics Presents issue 35. As I mentioned, this is a standard size hardcover edition with glued binding, matte paper stock, and 280 pages. Looking at the volume itself, it's clear to me that this was really a labor of love, because for me, this feels like a very random collection for DC Comics to release, especially in their entire history. There's so many collected editions that are sought after, even of this time, the late Golden Age, early Silver Age of comics, and the fact that we got a book for Detective Chimp is for me just a little bit fascinating. But hey, you go DC. Taking a look at the exterior front cover here, we have Bobo, the Detective Chimp, examining what looks like maybe the Helmet of Fate or some other helmet that looks kind of like that. I believe this is a Brian Boland cover, which is really fun as well. This is not indicative of the art you can expect within the pages of this volume, but still a beautiful cover. I really like how they designed this book. It's really clean, it's really effective, and there's just a lot of little detail work on the exteriors, dust jacket, hardback, that really just scream, we really cared about this collection, and I'm all here for it. Love the clean look of that black spine with the white typeface. And then the back cover of this collection is also quite nice. We have some of the main characters, and these portrayals here are much closer to what we can expect in the book itself. We have a great little blurb about the collection, some pricing information, what's collected in the book itself, some pretty standard fare for a back cover on a dust jacket, but like I said, I really like the design work, and I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up well enough, but it's not just a straight up black dust jacket on the back here. There is some nice design work here. Speaking of that dust jacket, I will examine it one final time, along with showing the interior flaps of the dust jacket, just so you can get an idea for what it really looks like and when it's all spread out. After I do that, I will show you the hardback book itself and the art we have printed on it. For me, that was one of the standouts of how this book was put together. Really impressed with what they did with the hardback volume itself. To me, it reminds me of an old school kind of hardback book from maybe turn of the century. And really, I just love it. I mean, I do usually with these collections like to see art printed on the hardback book, maybe from the collection. But with a book like this, I don't know if you could have found a better art to print on it. Honestly, you could take this dust jacket off and just have a beautiful volume to display on your shelf. I really, really love the look of it. Just really well done, DC Comics. It has this classic look that I would almost expect this from like a Sherlock Holmes hardcover edition or maybe a Tarzan book, and I think that was a really fun thing to grab from for this Detective Chimp volume, especially that these are really older comics. It just really works for the collection. Overall, just again, love it. And now a look at the binding. As I mentioned, it is a glued binding, and frankly, it's pretty tightly bound. I had to kind of press the pages down to really get more of the images. Luckily, it's such an old collection that we have a white border on all the panels just about, so there's not a ton of gutter loss, but you really got to work to get the pages down. I would have loved to see a sewn binding or something that maybe laid flat a bit better. Other than that, though, it is still holding together very well. No real complaints other than, again, I wish it would have just kind of pressed down a bit more, but we don't have a ton of loss. And after these beautiful end pages, we have a title page and a really well-mapped table of contents here with so many great details, a numbered table of contents. I just love to see it. And then we really just jump into the collection proper. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, these segments, the Detective Chimp stories, really come out of the adventures of Rex the Wonder Dog. So they're small stories, a couple pages each, I don't know, 5 to 7 pages a story, give or take. And they're all kind of mystery stories. It basically follows this guy who's a sheriff, Edward Chase. He's from the Oskaloosa County, Florida, kind of sheriff's department, and he has this assistant, Bobo, the Detective Chimp, and he basically helps him on all these mysteries. There's a surprising amount of just murder mysteries in this book. There are a couple cases of like larceny or vandalism, like I said, different kinds of theft, things like that. But there's a lot of murders in here. They're not overly graphic of of course, but that's kind of the mystery that this sheriff and this monkey get kind of caught up in throughout the book. I didn't know much about Detective Chimp other than what I've read in more modern DC fare. I know memorably he's in, let's say, like the Infinite Crisis Omnibus. There's a whole miniseries that has him kind of talking, and one of the main characters from one of the miniseries. Really liked this character, didn't really know what to expect from his origins, but I was kind of dissatisfied to see that he doesn't actually talk. He has thought bubbles, so we know as the reader what he's thinking and kind of what he's doing, but he's not communicating this to other people as he is in, like I said, more modern interpretations of this character. And there's just like this hijinks factor to a lot of these stories. Like I said, there are a couple pages, so they are a bit shorter, but being end of the Golden Age, early Silver Age, there's still a lot of word bubbles, exposition, so they do feel fairly dense for these short stories. The characters are really likable. The sheriff really just provides a frame narrative setting up kind of the mystery or the case they're solving. Every so often, Bobo will do that as well, directly kind of addressing the audience. And then we jump right into whatever story it is, and we have Bobo always getting kind of caught in the middle of just these criminals trying to get away with their crimes, and he always is managing to find them, stop them, lead the sheriff or other officials to who the culprit is. And there's almost like a Scooby-Doo factor to that, if you're fans of that show. But overall, it's okay. It's not too bad. Like I said, this is like early 50s comics for the most part, so you're getting that era comic book style. So what I mean by that is if you are a reader of more modern comics, this would be a decided change of pace for you. As I mentioned earlier, they are more word bubbles, expositions, a lot of very, very straightforward paneling layouts, a lot of little boxes and rectangles. But overall, it's fun. You know, the art is fairly consistent. Every so often, we change up between kind of the more classic Bobo look I see throughout most of this book, and then every so often we'll get this elongated face monkey interpretation. So we do have some changes in the artwork, but otherwise, it's just pretty straightforward fare. Nothing too exciting in my mind. If you've never read this era of comics too, it almost feels like when you read Sunday comics in like a newspaper, if people still even do that. But it's really fun. You know, overall, like I think you can get a feel for the stories after reading the first couple, and there are so many stories in this book. Like I said, they're only a couple pages each, but there are so many, and they're all, again, mapped in that table of contents, which is nice. I did like the stories. The characters were all very likable. I feel like the supporting cast, other than that main sheriff and the monkey, though, are basically throwaway characters. They're one and done. They show up for an issue for that week's mystery, and then you never hear from them again for the most part. And so if you know expecting that and you just kind of want to come in for a mystery, this can be fun. I will admit that I started to skim at a certain point because they just kind of started to blend together for me. That being said, we got a lot of different locales, we got a lot of different setups and mysteries. So for fans of mysteries or kind of armchair mysteries, this is fun. You kind of guess like who committed it, how did it happen, how are they going to get out of this issue. And I liked it. How are they going to solve the mystery? So if that appeals to you and you like this era of comics, this is definitely something I could recommend to you. If you are a big fan of Bobo the Detective Chimp, it's something I could recommend to you. Like I said, I've only read modern interpretations of that character before this collection, so I was fascinated to see where it all started, and it definitely has a humble beginning. There is a kind of quaintness to this era of comics, and the fact that we have this kind of like lighter era of comics traditionally mixed with these murder mysteries, it's just an interesting cross-section, especially because the tone is always so light and borderline comical, but you have people who have died in these issues, so it's really just an interesting book. More than anything, though, I'm just so impressed by DC Comics making a collection like this. Frankly, I would love to see this treatment done for some of its other heroes, maybe even some of their lesser heroes. The fact that they print something this obscure makes me hopeful. I just think there's so much in DC's catalog that hasn't been given proper collected editions, or some that are just long out of print with no reprint in sight. So this does give me hope for the future. I have no idea how this sold, but this is such an obscure release. I love the detail that went into the dust jacket, the design, kind of the layout of the book, all of that. Would have loved to see glossy print paper stock rather than the matte here, though it is a nice matte paper. And I would have loved to see a little bit of a better binding, at least one that laid open a bit more. Maybe with time this will break in further. But other than that, a really well-made little collection here. If you want to pick up your own copy, check out Organic Price Books. Thanks for having me, everyone. Bye.